This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, December 10th, 2020, and my guest is the awesome Jon Rettinger. Hi, Jon. How are you?
Hey, I am good. It's nice to be here. It's nice to actually be back on the show.
Yeah, I'm really stoked. It's been quite a while. You've really been busy since then. Like, your channel has just taken off like a meteor. It's been great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a weird time for everyone, but certainly tech has not stopped for any pandemic, and as you know, our coverage of it just keeps rolling along.
Yeah, no, I noticed. It's great. You know what I've noticed too, and it just occurred to me as I'm talking to you just now, is that we are seeing much more regularity in releases, and like these rumors of the Galaxy S21 come out in January now. I've gotten invites to briefings that are happening from phone manufacturers in January for clearly products that are going to come out then. So it's like they're not leaving us in peace. Like, remember how we used to have these lulls between trade shows where everyone had to recoup, and now we just have to run a marathon all the time.
Yeah, it used to be once you got on the other side of CES, we had like some breathing room, right? We had a little bit of time. We could exhale. We could all get over whatever weird virus we got from the show. And then we had a few months. But things are rolling. Release calendars are getting reset. And like the release dates for a lot of companies that used to be sort of, all the time and consistent are clearly like being shuffled. So Samsung's moving stuff around. Rumors are not going to have a Note line next year.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah. Speaking of weird timelines, Apple kind of like came out of left field. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago with the AirPods Max, which is a terrible name in my opinion. AirPods Studio was so cool.
I get that everything has like the pods name in it, like everything audio has. So, I guess that makes sense. But the Max, it makes very little sense to me, but Apple clearly does not care about their naming thing. We have, Pro Max and Pros and Minis and...
Steve Jobs would have never let that happen. I'm always saying that because it's such a cliche. But, I think that the naming, they really do have to look at the naming. And this goes for a lot of like Chinese companies too. Like, I review a lot of Chinese phones that are fantastic. And a lot of them have like, Max Plus and whatever. And you're like, come on, guys. Like, can I come up with... Xiaomi is a good example of like naming conventions. What naming conventions? It's totally random, basically. At least Apple makes sense. Yeah. Like, you've got 4 phones. They're clearly named, even though the name isn't great,
But it's funny you mentioned that. As Apple's naming goes, even as ridiculous as sometimes it might be, the rest of the industry will totally follow. Apple could come out next year with like the Apple Duty Plus, and then you'd have like 6 like Duty phones coming out from every other manufacturer, within 12 months after that.
So you know what we're still missing, right? We're missing an iPhone Air, right?
That is the one that,
just putting it out there for us, right? Like, let's speculate. And then we're missing a MacBook Max. The
MacBook Pro Max, they'll bring back the 17-inch.
I like it, yeah.
And they missed an opportunity with the Mini, right? To call it to get the airline consistent across their whole brand.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm also Nano. We haven't used Nano, and we haven't seen Nano in a while. We need some Nano.
Yeah, not since the iPod, right?
Yeah, I think the iPod Nano is the last one, really. So anyway, look, these AirPods Max, I ordered a pair just because, I don't think I'm going to keep them. Like, there's no reason. I have Sony WH-1000 MX4s. I used to have the MX3s and the MX2s before that. And I will stick with those because I think for the price, you really can't go wrong. And I don't see myself wearing these Apple ones. They look kind of so obvious. I'm not seeing myself wear these on an airplane when I get to fly again, But like, what's your take? Like, the pricing, a lot of people have moaned and groaned. That's totally Apple, though. I'm not expecting the pricing to be lower than Sony's. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, people who were expecting a affordable price to Apple haven't been paying attention to what Apple's doing, right? Like, their prices and their products always come in at a premium, and they're competing in a world they haven't competed in, really ever. You mentioned the MX4, the Bose, the new QCs. Like, there's a lot of really competitive products in this line.
Yeah.
Now, for what Apple can allegedly do, and obviously you and I haven't heard these headphones yet.
No.
But what they're allegedly doing here with spatial audio, with build quality, I assume audiophiles who want that sort of high quality audio but don't want to have to wire in will probably consider at least, dropping the $550 on these headphones. And the Apple fanatics who buy anything Apple does will buy them anyway. But beyond that, it's going to be interesting to see the market. I'm sort of harking back, I guess, to the original, HomePod launch, right? When it was amazing audio.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't like it, and you could be like, the audio fidelity was awesome. Siri was, holding it back, but price, it was a price problem.
And they fixed that, right?
No, the HomePod stayed the same, but the HomePod Mini.
That's what I'm saying. Like for most people, I mean, I agree with you. Sound quality of the HomePod Pro is great, but HomePod Mini is good enough for like most people, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, when the AirPods Studio, which ultimately became the AirPods Max upon release, there were a lot of rumors of another model. There was they were calling it a sport model.
Yeah, right.
I was going to come in at $350. So the Mini to the HomePod type thing. And I do think that that's probably still coming, but not until next year. And I think once those are out, then perhaps there'll be justification for wanting to go higher. I mean, but as somebody who's not really an audiophile, I got a hard time justifying $550 for a pair of headphones with probably the most ridiculous case I have ever seen in the history of headphone accessories. It's a bra, it's a butt. It looks like anything. It's a weird purse. You're supposed to use it as a purse, like use the headband as a handle.
It's an accessory though, right? It doesn't come with it because it's Apple, right?
No, it does come with it.
Oh, it does?
That it does. It does.
That is unlike Apple. I was expecting that to be a gadget you have to pay for.
But in new Apple form, it does not come with a charging brick. It just comes with a lightning cable. And can we just talk about that for a second, how they opted for lightning and not USB-C?
They are really digging in, aren't they?
Woo. And if the iPhone's going portless, there's going to be like only their pods lineup is going to have any use for lightning.
Well, that and your wireless mouse and keyboard.
Yeah, you plug it. Does anybody use a mouse? You can plug it in on the bottom.
Oh God, I hate to say it. I use it on my iMac I'm recording on right now. And it's like, and the battery's dying on mine too. Like I'm having to recharge it more often now. I'm really noticing.
Yeah.
And it's just such a piece of junk. I mean, I love the interface. Like I love using it. But I used to have the old one with the true AA's and it was just as terrible because it used to eat batteries like you wouldn't believe.
You're like crazy. But at least you could use it after you put the batteries in, right?
Correct.
Like you put fresh batteries in and like you were good.
So, obviously people can't see it on the show, but I'm going to show you the mouse I use as my backup. Like the jankiest yellow PC mouse from 1995. It's optical. That's about it. It has a scroll wheel that only scrolls in one direction. Like you can't do like left and right scroll. But that's what I use when I'm charging my mouse.
Yeah. So let me ask you, so I've been kind of following some of your journey. So I know, speaking of Macs, you just got an M1 Air, right?
And man, that's great.
I'm doing this whole podcast is being recorded on my new M1 Air as well. I just got it in a couple days ago. I opted to sort of spec it up a little bit. I
got mine with 512, but I stayed with 8 gigs of RAM because A, I like to live dangerously, and B, honestly, I don't like, it's not, other than video editing, that thing's never going to see any heavy loads, frankly. Like I'm very good at killing tabs because I came from a MacBook 12-inch. Let that sink in for a second.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to be fine.
That's still a solid computer.
Well, my 12-inch MacBook was fully spec'd out. It was the highest I could get when I bought the original, so I had the slower processors, but I bought the higher of the two slower processors, and I bought 8 gigs, 512 gigs. And so when I went for the MacBook Air M1, I decided, you know what? 512, 8, let's do the same because that's all I really need. Storage is, I can't go down on storage because, you always max it out somehow.
Yeah.
But I'm really impressed. Like, I have to say, like, you have to understand, I'm one of those old sticklers in Mac. Like, I'm always 2 OS versions behind. So my spidey senses were way up when I bought a Mac that had the latest OS. I'm like, I never buy, and I always buy a slightly older Mac, so I have not the latest.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's not my cup of tea. Like, I have to say, like, too iPhone, iPad-like this OS. But what I love is that I calmed down really quickly when I saw there's still a terminal. I can still run my shell scripts. Everything's still working.
Yes.
Most of my workflows are still working, other than, of course, 32-bit Intel apps, which, I skipped Catalina, so I never saw that issue. So I still run some weird legacy stuff that I'm trying to find new workflows around. But honestly, I'm impressed with the performance, especially native apps. And even the emulation is really great, but I'm not really emulating too much. Audacity, which I'm using for recording the podcast right now, would be what I would run emulated probably. And I did actually edit the entire show last week on my M1 to make sure that Audacity wasn't going to crap out on me. And honestly, it was so fast. It was amazing.
Yeah, so I am coming from a 2018 MacBook Pro, and I usually live dangerously. I'm usually running betas for OSs. So I opted for the Air with the 8-core and 16 gigs just to probably overspec it.
Right.
And I think the best compliment I can give it so far, now about a week in, was like, I don't notice any difference. Like, I don't notice that it's a Apple Silicon ARM computer versus Intel. It's obviously dead quiet. There's no fans, but everything just works.
I love that. But I came from that, right? So for me, it's the kind of normal. Like I'm no fan, but of course I love it.
Yeah, and everything has just worked really well. I was surprised that Rosetta didn't come installed. Like, it installs itself when you try to use your first x86
and it
app.
literally takes 10 seconds. You're kind of wondering why they just didn't do it by default, you know?
Yeah, and there's not even a restart necessary. I will say, what Apple's doing with Rosetta, kind of running it through that, versus what Microsoft did with emulation on their ARM. And I really like the Surface Pro X and that kind of stuff. I think Microsoft did an amazing...
I love it as a form factor, yeah, but it's...
Absolutely.
It's so bad at running Intel apps like the Surface compared to this, right?
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, and for a company with soft in their name, with like software supposed to be their jam,
right.
It is a very apparent how just a piss poor job they did optimizing for the ARM infrastructure. And I use Apple stuff, but I don't really consider myself to be kind of an Apple homer. Like, I'm not all about Apple, but what they've done with Rosetta and x86 is really, really impressive. Battery life has been like,
oh my God, it's stunning.
Stupid. I have to try to kill it.
I ran it all day after I edited the podcast. Like, I started editing the podcast and then I did some work on the web. Then I did, I went back to the podcast and I went back. Yeah. I was still at 20% when I packed it in, and I had been on for 10 hours, and a lot of that was editing and on an old crappy emulated app that I did.
Yeah.
It's not video editing, granted. And of course I got Final Cut for that if I need to. So it's native now, and that's my next thing. I'm going to try some Final Cut next. But frankly, I was like, it was faster at doing basic processing operations, audio processing, than my 2017 iMac that's in front of me right now. Like, a little bit. And this is emulated or translated, right? This is crazy.
Yeah. So, and I think for people who are like, well, maybe I don't need a computer right now, or I don't want to jump into like the first gen, the future of what Apple Silicon is going to be,
oh my God,
like, it's crazy impressive. I mean, when you start thinking about like multi-cores, what they're going to do with iMacs and 15-inch MacBook Pros and Mac Pros, like, the potential is stupid awesome for performance and optimization.
You know what I'm most excited about right now? Like, in this immediate zeitgeist, like, I'm imagining myself being in like the old days when we had some time off in the holidays, because I don't think this year, I mean, relatively speaking, because CS always kept us busy, but I'm just saying, like, I'm looking at playing with this a little bit in the next few days, and it's virtualization and virtual machines. Like, there's very little support right now, but there's a few things that are starting to happen. People have been able to run Windows 10 ARM on the MacBook as like a virtualized environment, which I think is really interesting. But I'm mostly interested to see what happens when VirtualBox, Parallels, all these VMware and all that come out with, basically virtual machines that will run on M1. Because for me, here's the holy grail. I want to be able to run an old version of macOS, like say Mojave. And that way I can still run 32-bit apps. Like, just for, no, I'm not going to do this for work. Like, I just really want to be able to see it actually being feasible. And that's a bigger challenge. To me, the challenge there was that, if you make a virtual machine, obviously it runs M1 instructions. And so now it has to emulate in the virtual machine. So the question is, do you emulate in the virtual machine, or do you create a virtual machine that runs x86 somehow and gets emulated by Rosetta? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the question.
Can you do that? I mean, could you
I don't think
emulate
you can.
x86 Windows 10 via like VirtualBox?
So the challenge right now, from what I understand, John, is that that's exactly the problem, is that when you ran VirtualBox or whatever on your Intel Mac, the reason it worked was because it used virtualization a lot. So it used special Intel instructions to virtualize that virtual machine. And that's why it worked, right? But now that doesn't work. Like even if Rosetta doesn't translate the virtualization instructions of x86 into something M1 understands, right? Which is why every virtual machine is not working right now. That is like, people are asking me like, well, how is that possible? I'm like, because it's a huge challenge. So I think the problems we're going to have is, yes, we're going to get virtual machines, but they're going to do really good at running ARM OSs. They're not going to be very good at running x86 OSs because there's no way to put that through Rosetta in a way that, because the system level calls here are at really low at the chip level, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we need. Like I want to be able, this is the holy grail for me, is I want to be able to run, an old version of the OS that's x86 and like just putter around in it. Like I'll give you an example of something crazy that my spouse does. On their Mac, they have a virtual box running Snow Leopard. Okay.
You're throwing it way back.
Intel built a Snow Leopard and it's set to use only 1 gig of RAM and it's set to the actual drive is only 8 gigabytes because it's all it needs.
Yeah.
And they from there run Civilization 3 PowerPC using regular Rosetta. And it works. And this is a 2015 MacBook Air. So imagine that they have a MacBook Air running like Mojave or whatever that's running a virtual box that's booting Snow Leopard. Snow Leopard has the old Rosetta in it, and Civilization 3 runs in Rosetta in that virtual machine like a champ.
I mean, listen, what Apple's done in the past is impressive with the emulation and virtualization stuff, and I think the future is going to be really solid for them.
Yeah, me too.
Do you think, and this is... because I'm just wondering, as like a fan of sort of PCs and sort of desktop hardware, do you think Apple's going to do their own GPU, or are they just going to do more cores?
More cores.
Or they're just going to be just going to be more cores, like dedicated GPUs done.
You can forget discrete GPUs. This is like doesn't make any sense with the kind of architecture they're creating. Look, they're even integrating the RAM on the same not die, but on the same chip, and it's like that's the way to go. Like I don't think it makes sense unless their relationship with AMD is such that AMD is doing something they just can't replicate. But remember, Apple does not want dependencies on other companies. So to me, they're just going to throw like, let's put 64 GPU cores and of the new generation of M whatever cores in this, iMac Pro or whatever, and just crank it up to 11. Throw more cores at it. And since they control the software, it's going to freaking run like a charm. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a lot of CPU cores and a lot of GPU cores.
What's crazy about that is what Apple can do from a design standpoint. Right. If you're not constrained with, let's say, a 15-inch MacBook Pro with a dedicated GPU inside of that, either you're going to have just absolutely stupid battery life. They keep the form factor the same, right? More room for cells. Yep. But the potential for like an all-new design and for power and thinness, I mean, a MacBook Air style body with the performance of what would I guess be... What, an i9?
Correct.
The dedicated GPU plus is
with like an RTX something. Yeah.
It's crazy. The future of what Apple can do with their silicon is awesome. The people who are still looking at it as just an iPhone chip in their computer are not doing a service to the raw power and potential that it has.
I don't think a lot of traditional PC people can wrap their heads about what's going on. There's a lot of denial going on.
Yeah.
Like, I write for Hot Hardware, right? You know that obviously they've been covering build your own PC rigs and they cover the graphics cards separately and stuff. And look, that's not my area of expertise. And these guys, I think, are doing a good job at covering the M1 right now. But I feel like there's a lot of publications like that out there that are just like spewing garbage, in my opinion. Like, I think, of course you can't compare the M1, even the air-cooled M1, with a tiny fan. By the way, those fans are completely different than the fans on the Intel. They spin super slow and are super quiet because there's so minimal cooling required anyway.
Yeah.
But the point is that you can't compare these chips to, a state-of-the-art gaming, right? Like, wait another year or two, then you can do this comparison.
Yeah.
And I think that they're missing the point. And look, I hear them, right? Building your own PC, which everybody seems to be doing over Thanksgiving these days anymore. Have you noticed that? Everybody built a gaming PC for Thanksgiving through Black Friday sales.
Yep. Everybody's baking bread and building PCs.
Correct. And so, I mean, I get it. Like you're freaked out by the fact that you're not going to be able to have a discrete GPU. These are not the computers for you. These are appliance computers for either professionals or consumers. And I mean by professionals, like, creators like you and like me. Like, I could benefit from a MacBook Pro if I did a lot more. Like, I don't do my videos at 4K yet, in part because I don't have the horsepower to do it right. And so, now I can actually step up to that because I finally have a computer that'll edit 4K without like stuttering, And I think that is not what M1 is competing with. So nobody is going to take away your NVIDIA RTXs and your Intel Xeon chips, folks. Like, you're going to be able to build your own gaming machines. That's not going to go away. But there's a good chance that gaming evolves to absorb what the M1 or the M series chip can do on Mac. And I wouldn't be surprised if some intrepid PC maker, like maybe Asus, like I don't think it's going to be the Dells and HPs of the world. They're too scared, I think, right now. But I think some company outside of the big, like it's going to be one of the top PC makers, but not one of the really big ones. That's just going to come out with, partner with someone, Qualcomm, who knows, to make an ARM chip that runs Windows better. And maybe Microsoft will get serious. And I think the problem with it right now is that Microsoft and Qualcomm and, other companies that have been making AC PCs, because there's lots of them, they're just think of it as a side thing. Like they think of it as like, we make these PCs for business people who need 5G connectivity and need, a light, long battery life, nice computer. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. What they really need to do is they need to make PCs that are XPS 13 replacements, like the bread and butter of productivity in the North American market for the average person, which is what the Air is, right? They need to make those with ARM chips, and Microsoft needs to come on board. But for that to happen, that interlocked Intel Windows thing has to break, and I tell you, when it breaks, it's gonna come down like a house of cards. Like Intel's gonna be in big doo-doo. So I think Intel right now is freaking out, trying really hard to promise the world to Dell and HP and these guys, and they are still hanging on there because they value the relationships. They know they can get custom variations of these chips made anytime they want, whatever. And they don't really have an ARM supplier right now that can match that performance. I mean, Qualcomm is doing a really good job, I think, but they're not quite where Apple is. And you can't be there because Microsoft is still a separate entity, like, right? So you know how there've been rumors of Google make their own chip, and Huawei's made their own chips, and Samsung's new Exynos is supposed to be kick-ass. I think the next logical step is Microsoft, that has a lot of money, needs to buy some kind of ARM chip maker and start making their own chips. And then, we can have that vertical integration in the PC market, and Microsoft can sell this entire vertically integrated setup to their OEMs. And make more great Surface products because, it's kind of like Android, right? You get Google making the Pixel, and then you've got the rest. I don't know. I think it's a tough one. I think that the PC world right now is really having to rethink how to do things. And if they're not freaking out, they're doing what BlackBerry and Nokia did when the iPhone came out. And they're shooting themselves in the foot,
And like for reference to people that weren't around during that time, when the iPhone hit, so it came in 2007, around 2008, 2009, BlackBerry was still king. BlackBerry actually grew market share in 2007.
Oh, yeah.
But when they brought on their dual CEOs, you could pick a BlackBerry product and you had to choose if you wanted Wi-Fi or GPS. Do you remember that?
Right.
They missed the consumer market so egregiously because they figured where BlackBerry people are going to stick with us.
But the carriers had a lot to do with that, remember, John? Like Verizon was like, we don't want Wi-Fi on your phone. We want you to use our data plans. Like, that's the short-sighted BS we had to deal with. Yeah. Whereas Apple turned it on its head. They're like, no, this is a computer in your pocket. It runs OS 10 at the time, like a derivative of that. Like, and what we do right now, our Macs have Wi-Fi first, and let's put an edge radio in there just in case you're offline. Like it was literally an afterthought to have cellular on that thing. Almost, it feels like today.
I mean, it's hard to argue, with that, especially with 2G being on board. But it was relying on the laurels, and I think you're seeing trends of that right now in the PC world. And you're right, your HPs and your Dells and really your Microsoft has all the power. I mean, has all the power. Microsoft starts dumping more resources into ARM version of Windows 10 and makes x86 a secondary.
And I hate to say this is this is like, I just want to put it out there for whomever is listening to this podcast. Like, I'm putting my advisor consultant hat on and not getting paid here. Intel, make a freaking ARM chip. Like, you had X-Scale. You had an ARM division. You sold it. Mm-hmm. That was a strategic mistake at the time. Now, we've been telling you for a few years now to start making your own ARM chips, and you're still not listening. It doesn't mean you can't make Intel chips. You're going to sell billions of Intel chips still for the next 10 years for the PC world. That's going to happen. But just, you need to freaking like plan your future here. Like, this is it, you know?
Listen, I don't know if this is an appropriate example, but you look at the legacy car makers who are slowly moving over to making EVs, which in my opinion clearly are the future, but still making really good gas cars. It seems like the same basic principles are applying here, right?
Yep. I mean, we're seeing it all the time. We saw it with phones. We saw it with the iPhone. We see it with electric cars and Tesla. You know, I mean, we're both biased because we both drive Teslas, but the point is, like, I'm a car enthusiast. Like, I love a stick shift gasoline car, like any day. But the reality is, that's like a horse now, like to me. Like, it's like a luxury. It's like a special thing that I do for the weekend with the top down when I go for a nice little drive. Like, if I need to run my everyday stuff, like even a long road trip. I went to Palm Springs recently in the Tesla for just a break because I need to get out. I rented an entire house with my spouse with a pool. It was nice. Well, guess what? The Tesla is a phenomenal. It's like a traveling business class. It's super comfortable, super quiet. Supercharging makes it possible. You know, I used to commute between Portland and SF in my Tesla all the time. Like, the reality is that is where we're going. If you're a car maker right now and you're not aiming for that, you are dead.
Yeah, I very much agree. Speaking of cars, do you still have the Boxster? Is that your manual?
I had to sell that. I had some problems with it, and I didn't really want to sync them. I could have fixed the problems. They were relatively minor, but I just couldn't justify it because I wasn't driving it around enough. What I'm looking forward to is getting another at some point. I want to get a 911 next, though. That's the plan. I mean, who doesn't, right?
Who doesn't? Yeah. Who doesn't? Yeah.
But honestly, the Boxsters are really cheap. If you want to get into Porsche right now and get something that's reliable and fun to drive, and you can get a decent Boxster for 10, 15K all day long. And you can get a decent 911 from that 996, 986 generation, early 2000s for about 20 to 25, a good one, like a really well sorted one. So it's not pocket change, but I think the fear for a lot of people is the maintenance and stuff. And honestly, if you find a good mechanic, it's not that bad. Like my ownership was 3 years. And if you look at my monthly cost spread out of buying the car and even including the sale of the car and including the maintenance on the car, it cost me the same as leasing a Toyota Corolla every month. It was like $200 a month for 3 years of pleasure. And I daily drove it for a long time because I bought it as an in-between between my Golf R and my Tesla Model 3, right? So I had like this weird in-between moment, and it was perfectly daily drivable. So, I mean, unless you had, it's just two of us. So, of course, you have kids, it's a whole different story. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of people don't understand and realize that it's not that big of an adventure. Like, you can do it if you're a car enthusiast. It's possible.
No, I agree with that. I have a soft spot in my heart for that car. So I used to see your pictures of it and be just like, look longingly at it, like just top down freeway cruising.
I finally reached that midlife crisis and I lived it for a while, and that was great. I'll go back to doing that again at some point. But right now, pragmatism has to survive and be at the forefront in these crazy COVID times. So, but speaking of like niche things that, well, not niche, but that I think that are kind of bring it back to the AirPod Max for a sec. One of the things I want to talk about is the audiophile world versus the mainstream wireless ANC world. Like, I'm a reluctant audiophile simply because I worked in audio for so long professionally, like as a software engineer in video games. I worked for Dolby Labs. Like, I love good sound, and I'm not one of those people who wants to spend a lot of money on my gear, but I love good sound. So I'm pretty critical. And I've always found that Apple, certainly the AirPods, the AirPod Pros are significantly better, but I still don't meet my minimal standard. And I'm hoping that the Max does, in the same way as I feel that the Sonys, the M4s and prior to that, the M3s, are just at the beginning of what I feel is acceptable in terms of performance. Like, so I'm very happy wearing my Sonys on an airplane in terms of sound quality, plus, of course, the great noise cancellation. But I'm hoping Apple doesn't like sacrifice that and maybe inherit some of that Beats stuff, because Beats, honestly, I've never heard a Beats product that I liked. I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are some now that are, and I should check them out. But I hope that they didn't inherit that Beats sound, that it's really going to be, let's try to aim for that Sony M4 sound and deliver that with the Apple premium of the materials, the build, the design. And I love the crown idea. I think that's very cool. There was rumors that it was going to have touch pads or something, like some capacitive controls like the Sony's, but it looks like they didn't do that. Or maybe is it in there? And when iFixit takes it apart, we find it somehow. You know what I'm saying? Like, we'll see. Yeah. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think, I don't think Apple is aiming for the audiophile, but do you think they can actually satisfy people like me or you?
So I think the barrier for entry for Apple, you have to be at least as good as the Sony M4s.
Yeah.
Like you have to, the audio has to sound.
The battery life is already less. So, like 30 hours on the M4s versus 20 hours on the so yeah.
And that's not a little difference. So I think that's your barrier to entry. I will say I have a lot of faith to Apple when it comes to a premium audio experience, right? Like I said with the HomePod, like people might not have liked it, but it was sort of universally agreed on that the audio fidelity was really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really good. And there's sort of their littler products, the AirPods and AirPods Pro. Those are fine, but they're not really the audiophile headphone. It's more of a convenience product. But when Apple gets into premium audio, and they've done it, slowly before, and this is the first time with over-ear headphones.
Remember the iPod Hi-Fi?
Oh, yes, with the dock on top. They've always done a really good job with audio. So I would absolutely expect the audio to sound amazing. Whether or not it's worth the premium, that's up to people to decide. But I think you can expect the audio with the spatial audio to sound really, really good and really premium.
Do you think a lot of these features are going to work with Android phones? That's what I'm concerned about. Like, I'm not planning to use this on my Apple products very much. I really want to try these out in the context of the M4. So for me, I have the M4s with the Sony app on my OnePlus 8 Pro right now. And I'm very happy because the Sony app gives me all kinds of little EQ controls and settings. Yeah. And so I'm willing to give up some things like spatial audio I don't really need. But I think that I don't want to give up on EQ and, some sort of control of how to configure the settings on the buttons or whatever. If Apple even gives you that option, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think Apple even gives you the option on iPhones or iOS devices, as far as I can tell.
But they might have some more spatial audio stuff. I have a feeling that will be something that's baked into the phone more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably built into settings, so you'll probably lose out on those controls. But I think as far as the audio quality goes, it's more up to the source. Because at the end of the day, they're just Bluetooth headphones.
For sure.
So I think that comes down to the source. So if you can deal with sort of, I guess, whatever their default profiles, I don't think it would matter too much what you're using.
I'm excited about their ability to do ANC dynamically, like a lot of more dynamically than others, like they're doing on the AirPods Pro, right? But I also am excited about the fact that there's a microphone inside to potentially do a mapping of your ear cavity, like some headphones I've been doing. It's been a bit niche so far, although Sony does it by scanning your ear with a phone. I don't know if you set up your...
Yes. Yeah, I've done that before.
And it's very clever, actually. I think a lot of people find that gimmicky, but I'll be honest with you, as somebody who studied audiology, the science of hearing perception, a lot of the way we hear audio is because we were trained by the way our ears are shaped. Like, if you were in a terrible accident and lost an ear, things would sound really weird for a while. Your brain would eventually correct, but it's very important to understand that we all hear slightly differently. And so that's why, my earbuds that I love don't necessarily work for you because you have a completely different... So this ability to scan the inside of the ear might be able to give everyone a more consistent sound experience. And that, I think, is something that Sony isn't really doing as well yet and that Apple could really own,
It's going to be interesting to see what the critical response is and what the sales numbers are. I don't think Apple's anticipating this being a huge runaway sales hit from this. Isn't going to, beat AirPods numbers.
Yeah.
But with the audiophile community, as they tend to lead, I think the consumers will follow.
Yeah.
So if people are, if you start hearing like, these are amazing, the audio quality is impeccable. It beats my M4s. It beats my Bose. You'll start to see people maybe justify the price in their head a little more.
Yeah, and some people are simply going to justify it because they love the design and the Apple integration, and I get that. That's kind of why when we're talking about the Porsche, the premium price of the Porsches and the kind of niche in a way of Porsches this product reminds me of that. As you said, there should be a sports version that, because it's much more democratic in terms of price coming. But this is, I think, Apple potentially, and this is completely hypothetical until I get mine, is maybe Apple trying to kind of, get close to that audiophile experience or skim it basically to kind of bring something better to the mainstream as the technology that's in there drops in price, and I like that. That's kind of why I had to get them. I'm like, I know I'm probably not going to keep them because I have what I need right now. And I have so many headphones. It's not even funny. It's just kind of like Endo Bong and I should probably like go count our headphones and it would be pretty crazy. But the point is that like, I think I'm trying them out. I'm definitely excited. Keeping them, I don't think I can justify. $600 after tax or whatever it is. It's just a little ridiculous. It's like 2/3 of a MacBook Air.
I know. I'd be curious what your experiences are once you try them and put them on. If it ends up being something that you think you can't do without, and you end up putting your M4s aside, I think that says something.
I'll be honest, I hope not, because I love my M4 so much.
Keep the money.
Yeah. But, I'm excited. I think this is rare for me to buy an Apple product on day one like that. But I was like, it's quote unquote only $600, and I'm really with the intent of not keeping them. I create a bit of content and return them, like I sometimes do for products that I can't get review units for. But at the same time, there is that possibility, you're right, that I might just really fall in love. And that's kind of part of what the experience is going to be. Same with the MacBook Air M1. I was like, maybe this is not going to be for me at all. For whatever reason, I'm going to want to wait for 2 years from now version of the M. But no, I am so freaking happy with that thing right now. Even though it's not running a lot of my older apps and I'm having to find new workflows, I'm actually finding it very exciting to get forced into refreshing my habits in a way, because it was badly needed. Like I'm still running some weird stuff that I wrote like in Xcode a few years back that runs 32-bit. I can recompile it, thankfully, so it's going to be fine.
Fortunately.
But I'm just like, wow, and I'm pretty impressed. Like if this is kind of my M1 review, our M1 review in the show here, this is, kudos to Apple. Like, I don't think I'd buy a Pro. Like, I don't think I'd be able to justify the 13-inch Pro right now. I don't like the touch bar. And secondly, I mean, unless you do sustained workloads, which I never do, I don't think you need that, right?
I agree. And I think if Apple told people, or if you told people, listen, Apple has a new MacBook out, just assume it's an Intel processor in there. It's more powerful. It runs quieter. And you can essentially spec it less. Like with 8 gig of RAM, that's all you're going to need.
Yeah.
I think people would jump at it. And then you tell them later, like, oh, hey, Apple also made the processor.
Yeah.
And be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. But sort of the thought of the Apple made silicon, I think, is still holding people back. It's really impressive what it does. And again, the best compliment I can give it is, in my use, I don't even notice it. It runs like a really fast computer.
Yeah, the average Mac user who doesn't have a special case use cases is going to be like completely, they're just going to get faster experience and better battery life all day long, basically.
Yeah. And that's going to be it. And that's worth it.
Yeah. And then, for me, I think I went ahead and bought one, obviously, because first of all, I need a new MacBook. I've got a 5-year-old MacBook 12-inch as my mobile machine. And second, I always said from day one, I said, the day that Apple makes a lightweight portable computer with an ARM chip, I am buying it. Like, there is no doubt in my mind, because I was there for the 2 previous transitions. I was there for PowerPC to Intel, and I was even there for Motorola 68K to PowerPC. And I saw that Apple's know-how in doing emulation or translation and how well that went. And so I had no qualms about this. And I'm honestly pretty happy. Like, I wish it was a smaller device, more the size of my 12-inch MacBook, and that might still be coming. But I'm definitely keeping this thing for a few years. Like, that's the thing about Macs. It's like, I keep them forever. I have a 2011 Mac Mini I'm still running. 8-core Intel Core i7 8-core Mac Mini from back then. It was a server. I bought it as a server, John, just because I wanted the cores. I didn't care about the GPU. I just wanted cores. And that thing is super fast. It's running like perfectly well on Catalina. And it's so fast. I put lots of RAM and I put a big SSD in there. 9 years old. Like, wow.
It's incredible how long the hardware lasts. I do have to give Apple credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, I do have to say there are a few things that don't work anymore. The SD card reader is broken. For some reason, it doesn't read SD cards. The audio output works analog, but you know how those were combined audio outputs that had the optical SPDIF built into the headphone socket? That digital out isn't working for some reason. Like it's actually outputting something that my DAC sees as a signal, but what I hear coming out of this, John, is this. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But it's purely a hardware fault, right? Like, but the thing is, that's like peripheral stuff. The rest of it just runs like a charm. Every few years, I open it up and vacuum the fan, and I put it back together. I run it as like a media server, If
it works, it works.
But yeah, it's amazing what Apple can do. And that's kind of like, a lot of people think that I'm dismissive of Apple because I'm not an iPhone user as my main phone. But you forget that I'm a Mac user, like a freaking hardcore Mac user. Like, I like my Macs. Yeah. So this is definitely giving me a lot of excitement for the future. So let's move on to some other stuff. We touched on the Galaxy S21 at the very beginning of the show, saying that, it looks like it's intensifying to a coming launch. Now, I haven't been invited to anything yet, and I don't think anybody else has either because I haven't seen any reports of it. But there was rumors of a mid-January, like January 14th, 15th launch for the S21, which is crazy. And related to that, we've seen some teaser videos. I'm going to link to a story from The Verge, but you can find this in many different publications. Basically, the official teaser videos from Samsung have somehow leaked. So what's your take on that? Like, what do you think? What do you think of the S21 so far?
So if those teaser images are true, I love the design.
Yeah, it looks cool.
It's a new design language for Samsung. It's two-tone. It looks premium. And if it's true that the Note line that Samsung is folding the Note line and just going to be the S series and whatever the foldable side.
I mean, that needs to happen, right? Like everybody seems to be in agreement here that the Note is kind of redundant now. Like the one to get this year, in my opinion, unless you got the Fold 2, was the Note 20 Ultra. It's the better phone of all the Samsung phones, especially if you want imaging. And the S20 Ultra just, was kind of like a proto version of that imaging system and just kind of fell on its face. So what I want to see is the S21 combining the two in a clever way. Like, I'm not an S Pen user, but hopefully they have a silo for the S Pen because the S Pen users really deserve their silo, in my opinion. But we'll see. Yeah.
So that's kind of the point I was going to make. Either one of two things have to happen. Either the S Pen is going to be on the S line. Maybe it's reserved for just the Ultra, let's say. And that would be fine. I think that would make sense. If it was just on the Ultra, you've got more room in there. Or the foldables are getting S Pen support. Yeah. One of those two is going to happen. I think they have too many loyal S Pen users. I don't think they're afraid to lose them. And I don't blame them for that. But combining the lines and making the S the flagship, I think makes a ton of sense. And you're right about the S20 Ultra. On paper, the optics and the focus and the zoom should have been amazing. In practice, they didn't deliver really on much that they promised from the camera
and they
side.
weren't able to update it either, which is interesting. Which I think it shows some things missing that they were able to add to the Note 20 Ultra. Yeah, I'm wondering if basically my gut feeling tells me that every S21 is going to get S Pen support, but you're not going to get the S Pen with all of the phones. And I'm hoping that at least the Ultra version has the pen in a silo somehow. That way, you can buy the S Pen as an accessory and use it in the same way as LG supports Wacom digitizer pens on all their phones right now. The Velvet, the Wing, the V60. It's kind of surprising. A lot of people don't know this, but this is kind of amazing. I mean, I don't need it, but if you're somebody who likes to take notes, you just buy like a Wacom pen and you use it on your LG phone. It just works.
I agree. And I think that's probably likely. Samsung is not afraid to offer different experiences across their S lines, right? Yeah. So different memory, different processor. I wouldn't be surprised if the 888 is reserved for the Ultra. Yeah. And even it's the, whatever the new mid-range have announced yet.
And they'll probably have an Exynos in Europe, like they always seem to do.
But what's interesting, and I think why Samsung is going to have a hit on their hands, if they let Qualcomm's technology do what it can do on the optical side, so for the cameras, they muddied it with the 865 and the S20 Ultra. They sort of put their own layers inside of it. Yeah. The 888, from just what the processor can do out of the box inside of a phone, is astounding.
Yeah.
And if they just let it do that,
I know.
I think they will have a huge hit on their hands.
And I'm super excited about the, 2 telephotos, because having used a P40 Pro Plus from Huawei, which had 2 telephotos, this is the only way to fly. Once you've experienced it, you don't want to go back. Like, you want that super high zoom with a periscope lens, but then you still want a zoom that goes in between, somewhere between your main sensor and your telephoto. And that's what we're looking at here. Speaking of related topics that we just kind of touched on, LG Slide. So maybe that phone will support pen input as well.
Let's talk about that.
But as you know, the Explorer project gave us a phone that I very highly rated and reviewed on Hot Hardware, the LG Wing. I loved it. Like, I don't think anybody should buy it in the sense like the average person, but if you're a tech nerd and you replace your phone every 6 months, go buy a Wing and enjoy it for a while, especially the Verizon version of millimeter wave. It's great. Especially, I live in millimeter wave land, so it's nice. I can just walk out my door and upload a YouTube video in 10 seconds. But the point is that I am excited about where LG is going, even if it's niche. And I'm hoping that this Slide that we've been seeing more and more leaks about is going to be just as cool, and maybe it will have pen support as well, because it seems like they're putting that in everything. But the news here is that it looks like it's coming. Like, there's SKUs appearing on Korean carrier sites and stuff. So, that probably means it's going to be like March, April or something at this point. But that's pretty early for something this radical, right?
It's crazy. So when you're saying Slide, for people who don't know, it's essentially like a rollable phone.
Yes.
Like the screen like rolls out. We're not talking slide like like an old school.
No. It expands. Like, you pull the sides of the phone and the screen stretches and you get more screen. Kind of like, that's the crazy thing.
Which is insane. And I wouldn't be giving LG a ton of credit for this if the Wing wasn't so good. I mean, and the Wing, I think...
The Wing is so good.
You said it. I think you said it very perfectly. I think it's the most amazing phone that I don't know who it's for.
Yeah.
But I love that it exists.
Yeah.
I think it was a brand new form factor we haven't seen, and they stuck the landing on it.
Yep.
I mean, they really, really did stick the landing on that phone. And if they do that Gen 1 so well, I mean, I think they're going to do the sliding thing really well, too. I give credit to LG, and I think they could out-innovate Samsung in a way that they haven't done in many, many, many years.
And this is the LG you and I remember. Remember that? Like LG has been so stale for so long, folks, that that's part of the reason I give the LG so many thumbs up in my reviews. It's not just because it's genuinely cool, but it's because this is the LG we all want, the crazy LG. The LG that just goes, F it, let's just do this,
Yeah, I mean that took risks and tried new things, and it's awesome to see. And again, what you said about the Wing was perfect. You upgrade your phone every 6 months, try the Wing.
Yeah, try the Wing.
100%, 100 out of 100 times, try the Wing. You can get it on sale right now. It's not that expensive.
No,
but it is something so new in the space, and I love that LG is doing this. I love that they're developing out in the open. You don't get really good Gen 2 products unless you get through Gen 1. And I love that they're letting people take part of that who choose to and can be a part of that experiment. I think it's absolutely brilliant what they're doing.
Yeah, we're more worried about the complexity of this device. And I think this is going to be more of a Gen 1 like the original Z Flip was, or the original Fold. Whereas I think the Wing, because there is no actual display that rolls or bends, I think it was a lot easier for them to come out with what was a very mature product from engineering right away, right? Because you're really just talking about a pivot, a really fancy pivot, a twist basically. And for that, I mean, I'm still looking forward to it. But, we'll see how it goes. I am just excited. Speaking of styluses, we also have a new Moto G Stylus that's leaking. The G Stylus last year was an affordable phone from Moto with a capacitive stylus. Let's put it, it's not an active stylus like what you're used to on the S Pen, but it looks like they're digging in and making a better version of what they did last year for 2021. It looks like it might be coming out pretty soon too. So It's bigger, of course. It's got the same capacitive, meh kind of stylus, which I never used. Again, I don't use styli, but I appreciate that they're doing a product that doesn't cost, what is the base note? The 20 is like $1,000, right? Like this was a $250 phone last year, and in bargains bin you could get it down to like $150 for Black Friday. So if this thing is even $300 at this point, and the specs are anything like that link I just looked at from, again, The Verge, it could be pretty decent. So like, this is one of the things about Android I love so much is you want a phone with a stylus for $300? We've got you.
Yeah, no problem. Got you covered.
This is not an exciting phone. It's like, it's not going to be like mind blowing or anything, but it's nice to see that it exists and to have the option. And then I'm just going through all the rumors and leaks.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Like there was that Pixel XC rumor, and I was just like, that's fake. Like, but Oppo Find X3 Pro. Now this is something I've been hearing for a while about, and I reviewed the X2 Pro last year for Hot Hardware. Check it out. It's one of my favorite phones. It's basically the luxury version of the OnePlus 8 Pro, but without wireless charging, which is a bummer. But it's still like, it's basically, if you put a periscope like folded lens on a OnePlus 8 Pro, that's the phone. They share the same display, BBK group and stuff. So the Oppo Find X2 Pro will come out probably before the OnePlus 9 Pro, and it will give us an insight on what to expect from the OnePlus 9 Pro, because I wouldn't be surprised if they share some stuff. The thing that's got me excited about there is 10-bit color throughout. So interface, display, camera capture, video, probably using the 888, right? Because the 888 promised the 10-bit support, right?
Yep.
So that's what we're looking at right now, which is kind of cool.
And it's pretty, for those who don't know, like 10-bit, if you use your video a lot on your phone and you try to edit it, without 10-bit, you get about 16 million colors you can edit with, and that's a lot. But with 10-bit, you get 1 billion colors.
Right.
It lets you do a lot with your video that you couldn't do before. And that is a really big deal for phones. And we're starting to see it become more mainstream. iPhone 12s have it. It's going to filter its way into a lot more Android phones. It's going to become sort of the de facto, just like, quote, good video that you get in mobile phones.
Yeah. So that's kind of why I wanted to touch on that, because I was like, okay, this is the second time I've seen this rumor kind of solidify. And with the 888 announcement last week, where we finally heard about the 10-bit support throughout, I was like, okay, this rumor is starting to get real. And, Oppo is well known for, at the high end, really kind of like pushing new technologies. So, although 10-bit's not really that new, but having the ability to make a phone that's kind of 10-bit native for color space is an interesting idea. And for those of us who, are creative, folks that create a lot of content, having that option is nice. And so, there you go. And speaking of BBK Group and Oppo and OnePlus and all that, CarPay, as you know, left OnePlus.
Making headlines.
And TechCrunch has a great story. I think it was yesterday that CarPay raised $7 million for his new company, which is an audio venture. So now my ears are really perking up. We're not quite sure what to make of it, but some of the investors are like, wow.
Like, a very interesting list of investors.
Like Casey Neistat. I didn't know that Casey was doing investment into startups now. It makes sense, though, from his perspective. Folks like Tony Fadell, who worked at Apple and brought us the iPod, the original iPod. He was the guy who did the hardware behind the original iPod. That doesn't surprise me, because he has done lots of investments before in various startups. But we're seeing some interesting names here, like Liam Casey, which is the CEO of PCH, which is a venture capital incubator accelerator here in San Francisco. But look, that's how it works, right? You know all these folks in the investment and business and tech industry, and when you start a new company, you just ping everyone and say, hey, I'm doing this crazy thing. Can I show you? And if you hit them up for some investment money, right? So it's kind of cool, because we keep forgetting this about CarPay. He said he's Swedish, right? Like he has a Swedish citizenship, so a lot of the funding comes from Sweden, which is really cool. And the company will be headquartered in London. So there you go. That's basically all I got for you on that.
Yeah, what's interesting, they said, I believe, that it's starting out as audio only, which means expand to other things.
Yeah.
Which I think is more intriguing for what it can be and what it can do.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know anything about it, but I'm kind of like perking up because audio. And I don't know. I feel like OnePlus's earbuds have been really nice. And if Carpe had anything to do with that, because he has good audio taste or whatever, I'm looking forward to a company, bringing some innovation in the earbuds. Like, I think earbuds are kind of like still a little untapped. I feel that we've seen, of course, ANC, but it's still really expensive. A cheap ANC still hasn't really broken, the barrier in terms of performance. And then, of course, sound quality is really variable. Like right now, I think the holy grail is if we could have earbuds that could scan the inside of your ear, even at like $50, $100, if chipsets could be created that, with a simple microphone, you just ping the ear and you get a map and you apply that map, convolution through the DSP inside the chip, and you sell that at a price point that, all the Chinese makers can be on board, then we're going to start seeing a huge revenue. In the same way as true wireless is now really true wireless. Remember how for a long time it went from the phone to one earbud and from one earbud to the other earbud, whereas now it's directly from the phone to both earbuds. That was enabled by chipsets from Qualcomm and MediaTek and others, right? So I'm kind of wondering, I hope it's not just another speaker. Like a speaker would be nice, but I don't know. I'm more excited about earbuds or headphones.
I agree. I very much agree. And there's a lot of potential in that market, but still something like that just still seems too obvious. Like, I feel like it's something that we haven't thought of,
You're right? Maybe it's something completely, maybe I'm not digging deep enough. Like that's my, my wishful thinking. Like having reviewed a million true wireless earbuds this year, I kind of feel like there's so much inconsistency in that market, both on pricing, performance, sound quality, fit, like all kinds of things. I want to see more consistency, and I see more consistency in wireless ANC headphones at a higher price point, mind you. Although I have a pair of TCL noise canceling headphones, the ones they launched at CES, that cost like $79, and they don't suck. They sound good. They do good ANC.
Yeah,
like it's possible. It's getting there, So yeah. So listen, there's a couple of more things I want to just mention really quickly, and then to wrap things up.
Yeah.
There's two phones I've recently reviewed that should be appearing on Hot Hardware's review roster soon. The Nokia 8V 5G UW, got that name. And the Realme 7 5G. And they're yin and yang. Like one sucks. The Nokia is a really disappointing phone. And then the Realme is a completely out of left field surprise. And the way to put it to you is that I don't know if Nokia still knows how to make a flagship. Like they just seems to have lost the plot. Like, and this is the HMD Global Nokia, right? Like I love the brand. I love what they're doing with, what is it? Android One and all that. But I feel like we haven't seen a good flagship or even a good mid-ranger from them that's competitive in a long time. Sure, their phones are beautifully designed. They're really well made. I'm sure they're very, very strong if you drop them, because that's always been the truth. But this thing is basically like HMD Global selling out to Verizon. I mean, a $700 phone, like that's Pixel 5 territory with a Snapdragon 765G that doesn't have OIS on the main lens, has 6 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. Get out of town. Like, what are you thinking?
So I do want to give a disclaimer that I have... next week, I've got a sponsorship with Nokia for this phone. It's not, obviously I would never call it a review, but it's more of a product showcase. So I do want to sort of disclose that. One area where I think the phone showed potential was in the camera software, as far as the granular controls and the manual side that you would have as a creator. That I did find very impressive. The execution of the software, I think, left a lot to be desired.
I just think it's the price. For me, if that phone costs the same as the TCL phone that you did a sponsorship on, like even $50 more than that because it's glass and beautiful and really big and beautifully made, I'd be on board 100%. There's nothing wrong with that phone in the vacuum. It's just the price, $700 for that phone. The specs just don't match it. That's my biggest concern. Like, I think that you're playing in, Pixel 5, Galaxy S20 Fan Edition territory, which you're playing in OnePlus 8, OnePlus 8T territory here. Like, think of what you can get for that money, right? And that's the challenge. Now, of course,
it's a lot of money.
It's going to be a bargain bin type of phone. Like you're going to find on discount real soon. But I hate to have to say that about HMD. That's why I'm so passionate. You know, it's just like they kind of missed the boat. And quickly talk about the Realme 7 5G. If you've read my OnePlus Nord N10 5G review on Hot Hardware, you know how disappointed I was with that phone. And here's what you need to know. The Realme 7 5G is what the Nord N10 5G should have been. It's £100 cheaper. It's made by the same company, right? BBK Group, essentially.
Yeah.
It's got software that's very close to Oxygen 11, or, you know, it's basically ColorOS, but from Oppo, but scaled down to being less intrusive and more and faster and cleaner and less cluttered, which is really welcoming. So think Oxygen OS 11 is what I think of. But the hardware is really where it's at. This phone feels and looks better than the N10 5G. It has a Dimensity 800U chip from MediaTek, which in benchmarks matches roughly the 765G and more importantly, feels as fast and to use. And the camera system's decent. Basically, the display is 120 hertz. It's got 30-watt charging, and the thing costs $300. Like, this is what we expect from OnePlus. Yet, I think what's happening here, John, is that OnePlus is sailing towards Oppo and Realme is taking its place. Like Realme is slotting in and going, oh, all the cheap stuff that OnePlus could do, you know, if they tried, we're going to take on. And this phone is remarkable. I mean, it's not recommended for the US because it doesn't have all the bands you need. But man, if you're abroad, you're looking for a really good 5G phone, ding, 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 there you go.
It's interesting to see what the brands, especially in the brands in that portfolio, are doing. OnePlus is going up market very clearly. Yeah. I mean, they're still sort of staying true, like you mentioned with the Nord, but they're clearly moving more up market. And there's leaving a vacuum there.
Yeah, but I think they shouldn't try to go down market, right? Because they're not doing it right. The Nord was phenomenal, but the N10 5G and N100, for every review I've seen, and especially my time with the N10 5G, it's just not there. It's just like, this could be a generic crappy Oppo phone. Not that Oppo makes crappy phones, but it's just like, they're not trying. Whereas this Realme is really trying. They're really trying to make a really solid, all-round, well-rounded 5G phone that costs $300, $350, you know?
Yeah, and I think you have to be... I almost feel like you have to try to find a bad phone nowadays, right? But if you're getting a phone that's in that $300 to $500 price point, as long as you are okay and at peace with those compromises, whether it's display, whether it's a certain camera spec that you want, you are still going to... The processors have gotten so good that you're still going to get a really good phone, and you can pick or choose your compromises. And that Realme, like you mentioned, does a really nice job of, I think, picking the right compromises to get to that price point.
And that's exactly it. Like, I feel like, you know, with the Nord, it wasn't a bit too slow for what we were expecting from OnePlus, but this is actually faster feeling, and yet it's a Realme phone, right? Like, so it's kind of very interesting, I thought. And then, so I don't know, keep an eye out for these reviews. I'm not quite sure when our editors will decide to put them on the site, but I've got those coming, and I've got unboxing videos on my channel that I'll link to. John, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet?
So you can find me, just put my name into Google, but it's youtube.com/Jon4Lakers. I'm there, I'm available, and I'm always talking tech.
What's your Twitter handle? Is it the same, Jon4Lakers?
Yeah, Jon4Lakers. It's horrible. Shows I had no foresight what I was going to do. But just Jon4Lakers across pretty much everything.
Nice. You folks should subscribe to John's YouTube channel. Really great content there, and follow him on Twitter. And folks, you know where to find me. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter and Instagram. That's TNKGRL. Basically, Tankgirl, the comic book character, drop the vowels. That's my handle pretty much everywhere. Twitter is where you want to go to talk about the podcast, comment on the show, whatever. Instagram is where you want to go to see pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures taken with phones. And of course, you know, there's a couple of YouTube channels we have now that go along with the show. We have youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast, where you'll find unboxings, hands-on, some review content. Basically, if you want visuals to go along with your audio, this is the place to go. And then I just recently started a new channel with my producer called Mobile Tech More. So it's youtube.com/mobiletechmore. And this is where we're going to put all the weird stuff we get to review, like we got a robot vacuum coming. We've got like an air purifier that's connected. It's from Xiaomi too, so it's kind of cool. Like we got a USB-C powered portable blender the other day. That's not very high tech, but the fact that it has a USB-C port on it, it was really cool. Margaritas anywhere, you know? And then, check out those two channels, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And then the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. If you want, you can subscribe there. There's an RSS feed, but there's also links to all the other platforms. We're obviously on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, pretty much everywhere you can find a good podcast, you'll find the show. So check it out. If you have the ability to review or rate the podcast on your app, please consider doing that. It helps a lot for people that kind of coming in and wondering what it's about. And there's also a donate link in the show notes if you want to help out the channel and make us continue doing these great shows every week. Please consider donating. It's a PayPal link. It's pretty straightforward. And then finally, I want to thank Audible real quick. They're our sponsor. They've been with the show forever. Like, I just love these folks. Like, if you want to help Audible help the show, please consider clicking through the link that I'm going to give you right now. audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. What you get out of it is a free book at the end of a 30-day free trial. So if you want to stay, you can get your free book. If you want to leave, you can get your free book. No matter what, you get a free book. It's exciting. And it helps the show. And, hopefully you stick around because Audible is kind of cool. Like, if you like books as much as I do and you read as much as I do, well, I don't really read anymore. That's the thing. I listen to Audible instead because in road trips and stuff, it's really nice. I love it. There's a great selection of books. A lot of books are read by the authors. A lot of books are kind of these epic things. You listen to them for like 10 hours at a time. That's the nice thing. It's like a continuous thing. A podcast lasts an hour. You're done. You move on. This is one of I'm looking forward to the next chapter. And, you have to take a break because you got to work and sleep and eat. But it's like watching a TV show that spreads over multiple seasons. It's really cool. So audible.com, check it out. They're pretty great folks. They've been with us for a long time. And the link to the free trial is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. Please consider clicking through. And I want to thank Audible for being our long-time sponsor. And you, Jon, I want to thank you for being on the show yet again.
Listen, it's my pleasure. I've been following you and your career for years. So it's an honor to be here. Miriam, I think, is always been amongst the best in the industry. You are honest to a fault, and I think that honesty is not something that we see so much in the space anymore.
Oh, Jon, that is really kind. Thank you.
You always have my respect and admiration. And just for what you said earlier, I've been an Audible subscriber for years. That's where I kind of quote unquote read all of my books.
Yep.
I think I have 6 credits waiting for me in my account because I haven't been in my car that often. But if you haven't given Audible a shot, and this is, I have no skin in this game. I really recommend you give it a whirl. You'll find a wealth of things to learn about and entertain yourself that you never thought before.
Thanks, Jon. And again, you and I have been doing this for a long time, and I've got just as much respect for your work because, I used to watch your videos on Techno Buffalo back in the day. It was like, yes, Jon's got another video.
Thank you.
Pretty awesome. Anyway, folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.